In the crazy world of football, there are times where matches seemed more like the Hunger Games in real life rather than sport itself. Imagine a game played in the sky, another under a snowstorm in the North Pole, or another under crushing heat worthy of a desert. Let's explore 5 games played in conditions so extreme they seemed impossible. Football is so global nowadays that you can even find cases of games played at the Svalbard archipelago, located just 1,300 kilometers from the North Pole in the Arctic glacier. This place, filled with polar bears and blistering cold, seems like an unlikely host for a football game. However, since the mid-20th century, the Arctic Derby has been played there, a friendly match between the few inhabitants who are passionate about this sport. During the Cold War, in the Soviet mining colony of Pyramiden, a now abandoned town, Russian and Ukrainian miners formed a team that played matches against Svalbard Tern, the club from the capital, Longyearbyen. Only the middle of the Arctic summer could be the match take place, and even the conditions were extreme, down to 16 degrees below zero. In summer, the players ran on frozen ground. There are no detailed records of the scores, but it must have been pure spectacle. Warmly dressed footballers faced off in a desolate landscape, surrounded by polar bears, their only fans. Which footballer would be crazy enough to play in short sleeves here? We go from the cold of the poles to the difficulty of breathing at high altitudes. In the Bolivian capital, you will find the Hernando Siles Stadium, one of the highest on the planet. 3,600 meters above sea level. Playing there is a tremendous physical challenge. The air has less pressure because at such a high altitude there are fewer atmospheric layers exerting force per area. This causes the oxygen molecules to be further separated, resulting in less oxygen entering with each breath. In 2009, in a qualifier to World Cup 2010, Bolivia took advantage of its strength at altitude to achieve a historic victory. That day, Bolivia trashed Diego Maradona's Argentina 6-1 in La Paz. It was Argentina's worst defeat in 60 years. The Argentine players were exhausted. Several resorted to oxygen masks to recover from the exertion in such extreme conditions. The Bolivians were too, but they were more accustomed to it. It's worth mentioning that the altitude of La Paz generated so much controversy that in 2007, FIFA attempted to ban international matches above 2,750 meters. This measure sparked protest led by the Bolivian President Evo Morales. Ultimately, the ban was not enforced. This advantage of altitude can become part of football show, an identity of teams like Bolivia, and as long as it doesn't jeopardize their health, I think it adds that touch of spice, of magic. And if we talk about spice, we need to talk about the games in Russia. Everyone knows that the Russian winter is brutal. A crazy example occurred on December 1, 2010, when Zenit St. Petersburg hosted Anderlecht of Belgium in a UEFA Europa League match. That match was played at the Old Petrovsky Stadium in St. Petersburg in temperatures close to -18. Okay, imagine a Russian winter, but in its prime. The pitch was so wide that UEFA authorized the use of an orange ball. The players took to the field covered in gloves and layers of clothing under their uniforms, even though they should have come out wearing at least 4 North Face polar coats. Zenit was already qualified from their group, but Anderlecht's qualification was at stake. Despite the crazy cold, the Belgians had to give their all to try for a good result. Zenit ultimately won 3-1, but the images left behind were shocking. Just days later, UEFA introduced clear rules on extreme cold weather, recommending the suspension of games below a certain temperature. If you thought Eastern Europe was the only place to play in extreme cold, CONCACAF also has its icy history. In 2022, the United States national team decided to take Honduras to their northern freezer to take advantage of the climate in a key match. That night, the thermometer was at -16 degrees Celsius with a weather sensation of -25. It was literally a game in a freezer, the coldest match in the history of CONCACAF qualifying. The match was literally an ice hockey game. The 19,000 fans in attendance wore clothes and accessories never seen before in a football game, and cups of hot chocolate instead of beer. The match ended 3-0 in favor of the United States. Their gambit paid off. The Honduras players suffered terribly. Despite additional thermal shirts, gloves and tights, 200 players had to be substituted at halftime with symptoms of hypothermia. They could have played in any normal place like Miami or New York, but with the hot and humid climate of Honduras, USA took advantage of that and organized their games there. United States qualified, but dirty in my opinion. It's not just the cold and the altitude that tests footballers. Extreme heat has also turned matches into complete madness, resembling the interior of an erupting volcano. A legendary case occurred at the 1986 World Cup in Mexico. In that tournament, FIFA scheduled several matches at 12 a.m. In the summer, the quarterfinal match between Mexico and West Germany is remembered by many as my Sunday breakfast, 2 fried eggs and a bacon. It was played on June 21, 1986 at the Estadio Universitario in Monterrey. Monterrey became literally like an oven. The temperature hovered around 38 degrees Celsius in the shade, with the sun baking the players. The Germans, accustomed to colder climates, were burned to death. The worst part was that there was going to be extra time. Furthermore, at that time, there were no official hydration breaks, so the players took advantage of every interruption to run to touchline to drink water or put ice packs on the back of their necks. Some lost up to 3 kilos in sweat that day. It was like a UFC weight cut. The result was a 0-0 draw, very little football, and Germany went through on penalties. These extreme conditions can affect the spectacle of football and end up being a boring match as the players' potential plummets. But on the other hand, it can mean the strength of an entire country. But honestly, it's not worth it if the player's health is in danger, because as my mother told me, the most important thing is health.